two trains, each weighing thousands of tons, are closing on each other on the same track at over 100 miles per hour. No steering wheel, no way to swerve. And at that speed, stopping takes more than 1 mile. On paper, this is a guaranteed catastrophe. Yet trains almost never crash into each other. Not because drivers have superhuman reflexes, but because buried inside the rails, the signals, and the operating logic of every railway is an invisible system most passengers will never know exists. A system built around one radical idea. And to understand it, you first have to grasp why a train driver alone never stood a chance. A freight train stretches more than a mile, loaded with enough steel, grain, or coal to tip the scales at 7,000 tons or more. Even a passenger express, light by comparison, weighs hundreds of tons and can race across the countryside at over 100 miles per hour. Both are bound to a single path of steel rails, and neither has the luxury of dodging danger. There is no steering wheel, no shoulder to pull onto, no last-second escape. The laws of physics set the hard limits. When a train is at speed, its momentum is colossal. Kinetic energy does not just creep up with speed, it explodes. Double the speed, and the energy quadruples. That is why a fully loaded freight rolling at 55 miles per hour can need a mile or more to come to a complete stop, even with every brake locked and the engineer reacting instantly. For a passenger train at 100 miles per hour, the stopping distance stretches even farther, well beyond what most people imagine possible. Braking is not just about slamming on the brakes. The air brake signal has to travel the length of the train, car by car, before every wheel even begins to slow. On a 100-car freight, that delay alone eats up seconds and hundreds of feet. Weather, track conditions, and the weight of the train all add their own complications. Sometimes the difference between stopping safely and disaster is measured in fractions of a mile, but that fraction is still longer than a city block. No matter how sharp the engineer's reflexes, there is no way to cheat the math. A train cannot stop on a dime. By the time danger appears ahead, another train, a stalled truck, or a signal at red, it is already too late to rely on human reaction alone. The physical reality is unforgiving. If two trains are on a collision course, even the best driver in the world cannot save the day by instinct or quick thinking. Something else has to intervene, long before disaster is even visible to the naked eye. The answer to this riddle does not lie with the driver. It is not lightning reflexes or a heroic last-minute decision that keeps trains apart. The true safeguard is hidden in plain sight, built into the rails, the signals, and the silent logic that governs every movement across the network. Every mile of track is watched over by a control system that decides, with mechanical certainty, when a train may go and when it must stop. This system operates day and night, immune to distraction, fatigue, or hesitation. Its rules are enforced not by hope, but by circuits and relays, by levers and coded messages, by a web of interlocking logic that refuses to let two trains share the same space. When a signal turns red, it is not a suggestion. It is the visible tip of a vast, invisible process working behind the scenes. The network itself, not the human at the controls, holds the final authority. Here, safety is not an act of faith in individual skill, but the outcome of strict, layered rules embedded in the infrastructure. The real story of why trains never collide is written into the steel and wire beneath every journey, waiting to be uncovered. Every train is locked to a path it cannot leave. The rails themselves dictate every move, and for much of the world's railways, those rails are shared. Passenger and freight, express and local, all run in both directions on the same strips of steel. There is no room for improvisation. If two trains are dispatched toward each other on a single line, They are set on a course that only one outcome can resolve, unless something intervenes. The driver sits inside a machine that weighs hundreds or thousands of tons, with nothing but a throttle, a brake handle, and a fixed view ahead. Unlike a car or a plane, there is no way to change direction. The levers and buttons inside the cab control only one thing: speed. When the train is moving, the only choices are to keep going or to try to stop. But the laws of motion are merciless. Even if the driver spots an obstacle, the reaction window is brutally short, and the brakes themselves take precious seconds to respond. On a long train, the signal to stop must travel car by car, air pressure pushing through hoses stretched over half a mile or more. The rear cars might not even begin to slow until the front is already deep into trouble. Human reflexes, no matter how sharp, are simply outmatched by the physics at play. The risk is built into the geometry of the rails. 2 trains, 1 track, no steering, no escape. The only way to prevent disaster is to make sure those paths never cross in the first place. That is why the railway's promise of safety can never rest on the person in the cab. The real defense has to be structural, built into the very logic of how trains are allowed to move. The separation of trains must be enforced by the system itself, long before any driver even sees a threat. Every stretch of railway is carved into invisible segments, each one a block with its own boundaries and rules. The single, unbreakable command is this: only one train may ever occupy a block at a time. This is the backbone of separation, the simple law that stands between order and chaos. Each block is measured not in miles or kilometers, but in the hard currency of physics, the stopping distance of the fastest train allowed on that line, plus a margin for the unexpected. No guesswork, no shortcuts. If a freight needs a mile to stop, the block must be at least that long, and often longer. For high-speed passenger lines, the protected section stretches even farther, swallowing up whole swaths of countryside in the name of certainty. The logic is relentless. A train cannot enter a block unless it is proven empty, its absence confirmed by the system. Permission is not granted on hope or habit, but on a chain of evidence that extends from the rails to the signal box. In the earliest days, this meant a telegraph wire and a bell code, with operators at each end confirming by hand and by ritual that the section was clear. No train moved forward until the message came back. The line ahead is yours. If there was any doubt, the answer was always no. This rule replaced the older, far riskier method of time interval working, where trains were dispatched at fixed gaps and safety depended on the clock and the confidence of the dispatcher. But time alone cannot guarantee emptiness. A stalled train, a misread watch, a moment's distraction, any slip could send 2 trains into the same stretch of track with no way out. The block system swept that danger aside. Now, movement is a privilege, not a right. The signalman becomes the silent referee, enforcing the law with every lever and every message sent. Block sections are not arbitrary. Each is designed to absorb the worst-case scenario: a train at top speed, brakes applied at the last possible moment, wheels screaming against the rails. The section must be long enough that even if a train were to stop as late as physics allows, it would still come to a halt before entering another train's domain. This is the margin that turns disaster into averted crisis, the calculation that makes the impossible, trains never meeting head-on, a daily reality. By dividing the railway into blocks, the system transforms a single fragile path into a series of safe havens, each one fiercely guarded by rules that admit no exceptions. In 1872, an invention quietly rewrote the rules of railway safety. William Robinson, an Irish-American engineer, had grown frustrated with the old ways, systems that depended on telegraph messages and human memory to prove a stretch of track was empty. The risk was obvious: a single mistake, a missed bell code, and two trains could be sent barreling toward each other, each trusting a promise that might no longer be true. Robinson's answer was both simple and revolutionary. He built a machine that could settle the question automatically, with no need for a watchful eye or a trusted hand at the signal box. Robinson's closed track circuit works with the rails themselves. At one end of a block, a low-voltage current is fed into one rail, runs the length of the section, and returns through the other rail to a relay at the far end. When the rails are empty, the relay stays energized, holding the signal at clear. But when a train's wheels and axles enter the section, they do something remarkable. They short the rails together, creating a direct path for the current. The relay loses power, drops out, and the system instantly knows the block is occupied. The signal flips to red. No guesswork, no delay, no room for error. Robinson's first public demonstration at the Erie State Fair in 1872 left railroad managers stunned. A miniature car rolled over a model track, and as soon as its wheels touched the section, the signal changed automatically. For the first time, the presence of a train was proven by physics, not by paperwork or procedure. The train itself became the evidence, its metal wheels closing the circuit and making its position undeniable. Skeptics worried about reliability, but Robinson argued that this was the system's greatest strength. If a wire broke, if power failed, or if the rails were damaged, the circuit could not be fooled into a false sense of safety. The relay would drop out, the signal would stay red, and no train would be allowed to enter the block. In Robinson's words, the system was designed to be fail-safe. A broken circuit would always act as if a train was there, never as if the track was clear. Within a few years, the Pennsylvania Railroad installed Robinson circuits on busy main lines. The track circuit became the backbone of automatic block signaling, its logic spreading across continents and shaping the future of rail travel. Every time a train's wheels touch steel, the system asks and answers the same question: is this space truly empty? Robinson's invention made it possible to know beyond doubt every minute of every day. The rails themselves became the silent witnesses, enforcing the rule that only one train may enter a block, and making the invisible logic of safety real. Signals do more than warn. They orchestrate the movement of trains by managing space itself. As a train advances along the rails, the system behind the scenes creates a moving envelope of protection. The cleared path stretches out ahead, always just far enough to guarantee that even if the brakes are slammed at the last possible second, the train will still stop safely within its allowed territory. The moment the wheels cross into a new block, the signal behind falls to red, sealing off the space just vacated. The track circuit senses the metal axles and instantly flips the logic. Occupied behind, clear ahead, never both at once. This creates a kind of invisible bubble that travels with the train. The crew inside may not see the boundaries, but they are surrounded by a living shield enforced by physics and circuitry. The safe zone is not fixed in place. It moves forward with every turn of the wheel and closes behind like a vault. No matter the weather, the hour, or the alertness of the driver, the system maintains this dynamic buffer. If anything interrupts the flow, lost power, a broken rail, or a failed relay, the protection tightens, not loosens. Signals default to stop, and the moving bubble becomes a hard wall. For every train, every mile, these shifting boundaries are recalculated in real time. The network does not trust memory or habit. It demands proof before granting access to the next section. The result is a choreography where each train travels inside its own protected corridor, never overlapping another's path, no matter how busy the line or how close the schedules. The safety is not static. It is active, relentless, and always one step ahead of disaster. When something goes wrong on the railway, the first response is not hope, it is suspicion. The oldest safety systems are built on a simple, even ruthless philosophy. Trust nothing, and when in doubt, stop everything. Power flickers, or a relay fails. The logic is unforgiving. The signal drops to red, the block is sealed, and no train is allowed to proceed. The system assumes the worst, not the best. This approach is called fail-safe, and it is the quiet genius behind railway safety. In most engineering, failure means risk. On the railway, failure means a hard stop. Robinson's track circuit, the backbone of modern signaling, was designed so that any break in the circuit, caused by a broken rail, a loose wire, or a power outage, mimics the presence of a train. The relay that once held the signal at clear loses power and immediately sets it to danger. No amount of optimism or habit can override this mechanical suspicion. If the system cannot prove the track is empty, it will not allow a train to enter, no matter how urgent the timetable. This logic runs deeper than just the track circuit. Mechanical interlocking frames, electronic relays, and even the most advanced computer-based controls all share the same stubborn instinct. A false clear, a signal that says go when the way is blocked, is the ultimate sin. A false stop, by contrast, is merely an inconvenience. Trains might be delayed, but lives are not gambled. The entire architecture of railway safety is built on this discipline. Movement is only allowed when every check, every circuit, every piece of evidence agrees that the path ahead is safe. When uncertainty creeps in, the answer is always the same. Stop, investigate, and only then proceed. It is a philosophy born from hard lessons and refined by generations of engineers who understood that, on the railway, doubt must always mean danger. Junctions are the pressure points of the railway, where tracks cross and diverge, and where a single mistake can send disaster rippling through the network. Here, the old rule, one train per block, no longer protects against the risks. The real threat is not just from trains following too close, but from a switch thrown in the wrong order, or a signal cleared at the wrong instant. At these crossroads, the answer is not left to human judgment. Instead, the machinery itself enforces the rules, making certain that only safe routes are possible. Mechanical interlocking was the first line of defense. In signal boxes, iron levers stretch in rows, each connected by a hidden system of rods and locking bars. When a signalman pulls a lever to set a route, the frame responds with a strict logic. If the chosen route would cross another already in use, the levers simply will not move. The bars beneath the floor lock together, making it physically impossible to set up a conflict. No amount of strength or ingenuity can force the system. Only routes that do not intersect are allowed. The machine dictates the sequence. The interlocking frame demands that switches and signals be set in a precise order, blocking any move that would create danger. If a lever is out of place, the rest of the system freezes. At major junctions, these frames might control dozens of routes, each mapped in a locking table that spells out every possible combination and its consequences. This creates a mechanical guarantee. Two trains cannot be sent onto the same track, no matter how rushed or distracted the operator may be. As technology progressed, the logic of interlocking shifted from steel bars to electrical relays, and then to digital processors. Yet the principle holds. Whether mechanical or electronic, the interlocking system enforces the same rule. Conflicting routes cannot be set. The operator requests a path, but the system checks every point, every signal, every circuit before allowing movement. If anything is wrong, the answer is always no. Even with all the logic built into the rails, the signals, and the interlocking frames, the system still has one unpredictable element: the person in the cab. History has shown that even the most careful driver can become distracted, exhausted, or suddenly incapacitated. That is why railways added a final layer, a human backup that does not rely on willpower or attention alone. On most trains, a dead man's switch sits underfoot or at the driver's hand. It demands proof of life every few seconds, a foot pressed down, a button squeezed, a lever nudged. If the input stops, the system waits only moments before it acts. The brakes slam on, the train grinds to a halt, and the driver's silence becomes a signal in itself. But vigilance devices are not just there for the rare collapse or blackout. They are designed to catch the slow drift of fatigue, the creeping danger of a mind elsewhere. Some systems require a pattern of inputs, no mindless tapping allowed. Others sound alarms that grow louder and more insistent, refusing to be ignored. If a train passes a stop signal, automatic braking kicks in, overruling even a conscious mistake. These safeguards do not make the driver infallible. Instead, they admit the truth. Every human is vulnerable. The railway's safety net is woven tightly enough that even when the last line of defense falters, the system itself is ready to intervene. The person at the controls is essential, but never left to stand alone. At the heart of the modern railway, another layer stands guard, one that does not just watch for mistakes, but actively prevents them. Positive Train Control, or PTC, is the American answer to the question of how to enforce separation when human limits and even the best mechanical safeguards are not enough. The system combines GPS, satellites, digital maps of every mile of track, onboard computers, and a dedicated radio network. Each train constantly knows its own position, speed, and the exact layout of the rails ahead, every curve, switch, and signal. But PTC is not content to simply inform the driver. It acts. If a train approaches a red signal too fast or tries to cross into restricted territory, the onboard computer intervenes. It can cut the throttle, set the brakes, and bring thousands of tons of steel to a halt, no matter what the driver intended. Speed limits, work zones, and movement authorities are no longer just rules. They are enforced in real time by the system itself. Europe's answer is called ETCS, the European Train Control System. While the principle is the same, the architecture is layered. Level 1 uses trackside balises, electronic beacons embedded between the rails, to send fixed instructions to the train as it passes. The onboard computer reads the message, checks the train's speed, and intervenes if the limits are exceeded. At Level 2, the system becomes continuous. Radio links between the train and central control provide real-time updates, allowing for seamless supervision even as trains cross borders or change lines. Level 3 takes the logic even further, replacing fixed blocks with a moving bubble of protection. The train itself reports its position, and the system dynamically calculates the safe separation, minute by minute, meter by meter. Yet for all their sophistication, these digital systems do not erase what came before. The logic of blocks, track circuits, and interlocking still forms the foundation. PTC and ETCS are overlays, guardians that watch for the rare moment when every other layer is stretched to its limit. They do not replace the old rules, they enforce them with new tools. The digital brain of the railway is built on the bones of a system that has always demanded proof before granting movement. In the 21st century, the promise of separation is no longer just a matter of relays and levers, but of code, satellites, and radio waves, each one carrying forward the same relentless logic. Only one train in a space, no exceptions, no blind trust. The result is not just a safer railway, but a system that can adapt, supervise, and intervene, even when human attention falters and the unexpected threatens from just beyond the horizon. Every so often, the headlines break their silence. A train collision, rare and jarring, cuts through the expectation of perfect order, But these events do not upend the logic of the system. They expose where the safety net was missing a thread. In nearly every modern crash, the question is not whether the rules failed, but which one was left out, switched off, or quietly bypassed. The record is clear. When tragedy strikes, it is almost never because the railway forgot how to protect itself. Instead, the pattern repeats: a safeguard absent, a circuit bridged by a careless hand, a digital overlay never installed, or a device left unmaintained. The aftermath is always the same. Investigators comb through layers of logic and hardware, searching for the missing link that let disaster slip through. Sometimes it is a wiring error that disables a fail-safe relay. Sometimes it is the absence of a system like positive train control, or ETCS, left out for cost or convenience. Occasionally, it is a protection device that was turned off, or a maintenance shortcut that left a signal vulnerable. The deeper the investigation, the more the story turns from technical marvel to a reckoning with accountability. The rare collision becomes a kind of negative proof, not a sign that the architecture is weak, but that its absence is intolerable. Each event points back to a broken chain, a rule not enforced, a check not performed, a fail-safe defeated. The question is never just how two trains met, but why the system allowed them to cross paths at all. In these moments, the invisible guardians of the railway, blocks, circuits, interlockings, overlays, step into the light, their silence broken only when they are missing. Regulations and best practices on the railway have rarely changed in anticipation. They have almost always been rewritten in the aftermath. Each major disaster leaves behind a trail of loss, but also a blueprint for how to close the gaps that allowed tragedy through. The story of railway safety is measured not just in inventions, but in the hard lessons learned when those inventions failed, were missing, or were never installed at all. In June 1889, a summer excursion train struggled up a steep grade near Armagh, Ireland. The locomotive stalled, and a portion of the train, uncoupled to lighten the load, rolled backward down the line. There was no absolute block system in place, only the old-time interval method. Another train was dispatched behind, unaware that the track was now occupied. The collision that followed killed 80 people, including many children. The public outcry was immediate and fierce. For the first time, the British Parliament responded with law, not suggestion. The Regulation of Railways Act of 1889 made absolute block signaling a statutory requirement across the United Kingdom. No longer could a train be sent into a section without positive proof that it was empty. The iron rule, one train per block enforced by interlocked signals, became law, not just custom. A century later, in December 1988, the morning rush at Clapham Junction in London turned catastrophic. A packed commuter train ran into the rear of a stationary train which was then struck by a third. 35 lives were lost, and the cause was traced not to a failure of principle, but to a single maintenance error. During rewiring work, a loose, uninsulated wire remained connected, bypassing the fail-safe logic of the signal relay. The signal displayed a false clear aspect, and the driver, trusting the system, advanced into danger. The investigation uncovered not just a technical flaw, but a culture of rushed work, poor oversight, and inadequate inspection. The aftermath was sweeping. Independent verification of all safety-critical works became mandatory, with a new emphasis on maintenance discipline, systematic testing, and oversight that reached all the way to senior management. British Rail's entire approach to safety was forced to evolve, with stricter protocols and new standards for every piece of wiring and every relay. In October 1999, tragedy struck again at Ladbroke Grove, just outside London's Paddington Station. A commuter train passed a red signal and collided head-on with an express, engulfing both in fire. 31 people died. The investigation found the signal's visibility was poor. But the deeper problem was the absence of an automatic safeguard. The Train Protection and Warning System, TPWS, which could have stopped the train after it missed the signal, had not yet been installed on that section. The collision made the cost of delay undeniable. Within months, TPWS was rolled out across the national network, and momentum built for a new generation of protection. The European Train Control System, ETCS, designed to enforce movement authorities with digital certainty, even when human eyes and reflexes fail. Across the Atlantic, a different kind of oversight proved fatal in 2008 at Chatsworth, California. A Metrolink commuter train sped through a red signal, its engineer distracted by texting, and collided head-on with a Union Pacific freight. 25 people died, and more than 100 were injured. The investigation found that positive train control, PTC, a system designed to enforce speed limits and stop trains automatically if a signal is missed, was not yet operational. The technology existed, but implementation had lagged. The aftermath was swift. Congress passed the Rail Safety Improvement Act of 2008, mandating PTC on most U.S. main lines. Billions were spent, deadlines were set and extended, and the slow rollout became a national priority. The lesson was searingly clear. Without digital enforcement, the system was only as strong as its weakest human link. Each of these disasters forced a reckoning. Investigators, lawmakers, and railway engineers translated human loss into new layers of protection, turning gaps into mandates, and mandates into hardware and code. The invisible net that keeps trains apart is woven tighter with every failure, each strand a response to a tragedy that proved what happens when trust is misplaced or the system is incomplete. In the end, the real story of railway safety is not just about the layers themselves, but about the relentless drive to close every loophole exposed by disaster. The rules are written in the aftermath, but enforced every day by the silent logic that refuses to let history repeat itself. Every day, millions trust their lives to rails they never control, and to signals they almost never see. The true safeguard isn't the steel or the speed. It is the invisible web of logic that refuses to gamble with error. As rail networks race to automate and expand, that quiet vigilance remains our last line of defense. In a world built on certainty, it is the silence between disasters that proves the system works. Share your thoughts below.